Light, where we expose modalities, providers, and tips and tricks for you to shine bright and live your best life. If you don't know, this month is actually Alcohol Awareness Month. So I thought it would be a great time to talk about one of my favorite life hacks, which is your relationship with alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this girl, Amanda, that's what she talks about.
Yeah.
So, Amanda, will you introduce yourself to
Yes,
the group?
Absolutely. I am Amanda Kuda. I am a holistic life coach, but I teach a modern approach to personal development and spirituality, all through the lens of elective sobriety. Now, elective sobriety is a little different than what we traditionally assume, because elective sobriety is by choice. It's not by any necessity, addiction, or dependency on alcohol. So it's just for people who want to live a better life. They want to let their light shine bright. They want to get out of this kind of distant fog that they've been in under the spell of alcohol. And it's really a growing movement. In the last 5 years, it has been something that's really come on the scene and really gotten a lot of attention.
Yeah, I was so happy to get connected through friends of friends, actually people who've been on the show, because that was something that kind of came to me. And now that I don't drink, the first question is like, oh. Like it's this very
some dismal path.
Sensitive subject.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you must have fallen off the wagon. I was like, no, I just figured out it wasn't working for me anymore.
Yeah.
And I've just decided to cut out things that aren't working.
Totally. You know, it's kind of interesting. I was having a conversation with one of my girlfriends, is we have this perception that you have to hit rock bottom. But for people like you or me or a lot of the individuals I work with, what's worse than rock bottom, which it obviously is terrible, but is this sense of being on what I like to call the plateau of good enough.
Completely.
And that is where you're doing pretty good in life. You have plenty to be proud of. People are patting you on the back. Everyone admires you. You got your life together. You're checking the boxes, but you know, you're not doing your best. You are not shining as brightly as you could. There's something holding you back. You're doing really good. You're kicking ass, but you have more to give. And that, it hurts. It hurts to be stuck on that plateau. And that's exactly for me in my life where alcohol kept me. It was on this plateau of everything's good enough. Why can't I just be happy? Shouldn't I just be happy? But I wasn't. And I saw the peak of potential up there, but I just couldn't get to it because I was weighed down all the time with this social schedule and the drinking and the hangovers that were not letting me be my best self.
Yeah. So what was that turning point for you in your relationship with alcohol?
You know, I had really started doing what I thought was going to help me climb to the peak of potential. I had started seeing a therapist. I was working with shamans and all these other healers. I was going to the gym. I was eating right. I'm like tracking my food. I'm going to yoga. I'm reading self-help. I'm reading spirituality. And it seemed like I was just like running on a treadmill and I was getting nowhere fast. So I was doing things, but nothing was really coming to fruition. Everything still felt hard. Everything still felt stagnant. And I kept getting this little like angel on my shoulder say, hey, Amanda, maybe you should quit drinking. Well, you probably want to try that. And I'm like, no, I don't.
Shut up, Angel.
That doesn't sound good. And so I had to try to make this negotiation. I'm like, why don't I just try to cut back? And I thought I was being really smooth, like I was gaming the system. And I mean, I'm not sure what it's like for everyone else. No, actually, I do know what it's like for everyone else, because I've talked to a lot of people. And for me, going from being a party girl, then of course I cut back a little bit as I got later into my 20s and 30s, but trying to go directly to moderation did not work. And it's this fantasy we have that we can just cut back or like take a short break and then we'll be able to moderate. And that's just not the facts. That's not the truth. It's not how it works for most people. There is a small percentage of the population that would work for. But I tried to game the system and that didn't work. And I only felt more miserable and stuck, because then I felt like a failure and I felt like something was wrong with me. And there wasn't anything wrong with me. I just am not intended to moderate alcohol. So finally I cut it out. And it was like, after a few months, I started to feel better. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do this a little longer. So I went 6 months and then a year. And during that time, something really magical started to happen, where everything that I had been doing that seemed to be fruitless started to come to fruition. And I started to attract all of these new opportunities, all of this like abundance, and I started to feel happy. And it wasn't that I was depressed before, but I can tell you from someone who now feels happy that wasn't happiness before. And all of a sudden I felt light, and that just felt really good.
Why do you think that the manifesting and the not drinking go so well together? Because you're actually the first person that I've heard speak in kind of this, relationship with alcohol, alcohol-free life, that really ties those together so closely. And I love your understanding behind why those are so connected.
Yeah. So when I talk about manifestation, what I mean is becoming a match, taking aligned action, and allowing that to easily attract what you want into your life without having to like grasp and claw for it. Because that's what I feel like I was doing before. I was like always flailing my arms, like, hey, I want that. Like, I want you to talk to me, or I want that job, or I want that money. And I constantly felt like I was just like struggling for it. And once alcohol is out of the picture, what happens is everything has an energetic vibration. Everything you ingest, everything you interact with, and that's going to impact your energetic vibration. So alcohol is a depressant. You probably know that, but you just want to forget. And anything that's a depressant is going to lower your energetic vibration. And so it's not that you can't have the things that are up here that are higher vibe. It's just that you're really going to have to struggle to get them. So that's what I was doing. So now I take alcohol out of the system, and these things are at a more equal level. So it's like we're magnetized together with ease. I say, hey, universe, or whomever you speak with or convene with up there, this is what I want. Show me how to get it. And it just started coming into my life. The people who I needed to make connections with, the jobs or the money or whatever it was, all of a sudden started showing up with ease. And it's because I got out of my own way, but it wasn't just like I stopped drinking and I started manifesting. That's not, it's not like abracadabra, but I also was doing all of this additional work. I was healing my traumas. I was still going to therapy. I was still doing the spiritual practice. And so it's like, zoop, I rose from taking out alcohol. And then I kept adding on all of these other things to where I was just a much closer match to the things that I wanted. And I also felt like I was worthy of it. Before, I didn't feel like I was worthy, even though I convinced myself that I was confident in all of those other things that we do, especially for successful. Deep down, I didn't feel worthy. And so it was just adding in almost this like magic bullet to all of the things that I was already doing.
Yeah. It's almost like up leveling every single thing. And I think for so many people, especially if you've been on kind of the personal growth wellness path for a long time, you're like, I'm doing the things, or I'm reading the books. Like, why isn't it bringing what I think that it's going to be bringing? And usually it's because we have some kind of personal block. That could be alcohol for you. It could be all kinds of things for other people.
Yeah.
But I do think that alignment piece is so vital, because one of the things I used to talk a lot about with my clients was, to be the person you want, you just slowly have to start acting as if they did, as they would.
Right.
It's like, envision who is that person. And then it makes everything this very black or white A and B decisions. Because it's like, would that person do this?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Does it get me closer to that, or does it get me further away?
I mean, and then it starts, you can almost gamify it. You're like, okay, well, this person does these things every day. And that's the easy, and then it feels less overwhelming, because it's not like, oh, hold on, let's redo my whole life all at once. Because so many people want that kind of quick fix. And I think, and then they just end up feeling even worse, because then they're a failure, because they've set themselves up.
Right, because a quick fix is rarely ever a long-term solution, right? If you quick fix a hole in your wall with tape, eventually the hole in the wall is going to fall apart even more, right?
Exactly.
So it's just getting past the quick fix. And then also the really important thing about it, which I think that really correlates with your work, is healing that concept of self.
100%.
And coming into your self-worth, because what we're ultimately doing is, we're using alcohol as a crutch, but why do we use a crutch? Because we're wounded, because we can't do something to what we think is proper form. So we do it because we don't feel fun enough, funny enough, outgoing enough, sexy enough. We feel like we are too anxious or too sad or too boring or whatever. And all of those things are just you saying to yourself, you are not good enough. And you need something outside of yourself to make yourself good enough. And that thing that's so easily accessible is alcohol. So when you take that out of the system, you automatically clear up space to do what ultimately is probably some really hard work, to like grapple with, why didn't I think I could do this? How do I make myself believe in myself? How do I get those skills if they are skills that I lacked? And how do I work on and tinker with and become aware of the suboptimal beliefs or patterns or wounds that were making me use a crutch or making me cheat.
Completely. And that's so interesting, because we have so many clients that come in here that I would say are, in their minds, typical, regular, average drinkers, or even kind of maybe heavy average drinkers. And they're coming in for maybe some anxiety, maybe some personal work, maybe some self-exploration. And then I'll talk to them, halfway through their series, and they're like, what's so crazy? I haven't drank at all since I started. And I was like, yeah, because you actually weren't drinking because you wanted to. You were actually drinking to cope with your anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And you've told yourself this idea that I need the mom wine, or I need I deserve a drink when I get home because life is stressful. And then I think it adds to that part where and this was my case, it's interesting when you have unhealthy coping mechanisms, when you take them away, you start to see some real interesting stuff about like what was really under there. Because I'm such a number. Like I'm numb of choice. Like food, number one, then alcohol, then sex. I mean, it was like anything to not feel the things.
Yeah.
And when I stopped coping in those unhealthy ways, I had to really start to look at what was my deep core wound, and mine is all worthiness stuff. And how do I, of course, fix that number one relationship with self? And then of course that and then expands out. And then you start to look at like, well, why did I sabotage my first marriage? Why was I not a good friend? Why was I flaky at certain things? And then you really start to have to reckon with the person you were when you were unhealthy, and find love for that, traumatized, hurt child that is in all of us.
Oh, totally.
That everybody needs to unpack, but it really does start with that internal healing. But if you're still numbing all the time, it's really challenging to do that work.
Right.
It's not impossible.
You can't, if you have a wound, at some point it needs to breathe, and you can't, you could always put a Band-Aid on the wound. It's not going to get that air, that fresh air that it needs. And it is really humbling to reckon with those things that you've been avoiding looking at. It's almost as if, you have told a teenager to clean their room, and so they've been putting like all the dirty socks and like the happy
in the closet
containers, in the closet or under the bed. And now the bed is full, or the closet is full, and it's spilling out. And so now you have to slowly pull out the moldy, dessert container and cereal bowl or whatever. And it's gross, and you are pissed off at yourself for not dealing with this earlier. And then you realize that you're the one who put it all there in the first place, and that it really wasn't everyone else's fault, and that, crummy things happen to you, and you're the one who's choosing to react the same way, or you're the common denominator in all of your shitty situations. So
completely.
How can you take radical accountability? Because ultimately, even though that hurts, it's the most empowering thing, because then you also have the power to choose again.
Yes.
And that's really what you're doing when you change any suboptimal behavior or any numbing behavior, is you're choosing again to show up for yourself in a way that a past version of you wasn't ready to, or wasn't willing to. And there's nothing wrong with any of those numbing activities. You all do them to get a sense of safety when we don't know how to cultivate it for ourselves. But as soon as you get the idea that maybe your life would be better without alcohol, without the excessive food, without the excessive sex, whatever it is, do not ignore that voice. It is there for a reason. It is there for a reason. And you would not be having that idea if you were not meant to live a better life. There are some people who go through their lives completely numb, and it never occurs to them to get in check with the food, get in check with the booze, get in check with the sex. And while I would want more for that person, that maybe that's just their life right now.
Yeah.
But if you've had an idea like, hey, I wonder if this is just not working, it's so important that you listen to it and find some sort of path forward for yourself.
Completely. I always say the universe first taps you on the shoulder, and then it hits you in the arm, and then it will hit you over the head with a sledgehammer.
Totally, it will. And it's not fun. It's so much easier if you get to it when it's just
when it's just the tap. And that's the thing about I love this idea of like bringing curiosity and exploration into it. It doesn't have to be a long-term, like you don't have to set out and say, I'm never going to drink again. This is what we're going to do. But just explore that space. And I will tell you, after talking to, dozens of people who are sober or sober curious, I have yet to find one who did a sober curious time stint who was like, never mind, it was better when I was wasted.
Yeah, it was totally not worth it. No, never.
Not one person.
I know plenty of people who do, and I'm sure you do too, who go back to it.
Yeah.
And then it's just so much more difficult to change your path again once you go back to that vice behavior. But, oh man, you said something that I wanted to comment on, but now I've lost it a little bit. But either way, it'll come back to me if it's important. Making that, the forever. You said, I don't say you're going to quit drinking forever. Do not say that, because anytime you tell yourself something, forever, the inner rebel comes up and they're like, F that, we're drinking now.
I can do whatever I want.
Yes. And forever is like, puts you into this freak out mode that like, you just go down a path of future tripping that you don't need to be on. So I would say if you are considering the sober curious path, set yourself some guardrails, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and keep extending it versus saying forever, because then you're just going to get into screw it, that's too long, and you'll check out. It's just it's setting you up for self-sabotage. So completely. I say never say forever.
Yeah. Never say forever. I love that. Let's kind of explore some of people's biggest concerns when they're even thinking about this, because we went on a walk last week and both of us had a very similar it's the same questions most people ask. So what are the biggest concerns that people have when they reach out to you about exploring this?
The first one is always, how will I have fun? How will I be fun? How will I have friends? And I actually, on the way over here, was just talking to someone who had this question, and I have to tell you a few things. Number one, hard truth, if it's not fun without alcohol, it's just not fun. It's just not fun. You are making your brain dumb so that you can tolerate a situation and people that are not in their full mental capacity.
Completely.
Right? And that doesn't mean that there's anything bad or wrong with that. Like, I'm sure we had blasts in those times where we were like wasted out of our minds. But if you're coming into a situation and you're convincing yourself that, oh no, there's something wrong with me because I used to go to this club or I used to go to this situation with these people and now it doesn't feel fun. Of course it's not fun. You're on two different levels, right? And so maybe for a while you get your footing, just don't do those things. They might not ever become fun like they were again, and that's okay. Maybe that thing is just not for you. But that doesn't mean there's nothing for you to do. That doesn't mean you're like destined to a life of solitude. It just means you need to reimagine some things. So what I always recommend are two different things. One is, don't write off your current friends, because you'd be really surprised with how many of them are wondering the same thing or would absolutely welcome a different type of connection than what you're used to. So I would look for the friends of yours that you know are solid friendships that could grow closer and invite them to do other things. Don't try to still hang out with them in that old situation, because that's not going to be fun. Instead, say, hey friend, I really like to hang out with you. Can we go for a walk? Can we go get a coffee? Can we go to breakfast? Can we go get a juice? Whatever non-drinking activity it is, invite them to do that, and know that those friendships, if they're meant to stick around, can shift form. And even though you've had your blinders on because you've been in your own little social circle, guess what? There's literally millions of people in the world. And I don't know if you know this, but a lot of them are here right now on the internet. And you can find them, and a lot of them have the same mindset as you. You just have failed to see them because you are in party mindset. They're right out here. You just cannot see that they exist because you have your blinders on. And if you go out and look for them in the places they might hang out, yoga space, a wellness space, meditation space, anything that has to do with health and wellness is my number one
outside,
go-to.
like outdoor activities, like healthy, fun hiking groups, garden springs.
Anywhere. Like they are out there, and you just have to put yourself in those places and then just say hello. And it doesn't, I know that so many people have social anxiety. I am one of them. But it's not, here's like an easy pickup line is, hey, have you ever been to this class before? Have you ever been to this place before? Can you tell me anything about it? And act dumb and just ask them to tell you about the place or the thing or the class or the Barton Springs or wherever you're at. And they'll be glad to give you their opinion, or maybe they don't know and then you just talk and that's okay. But you can ask a super simple, very basic, get to know you question and start a conversation and become friends.
And if you live in a place like Austin, actually the sober and sober curious groups in Austin are actually very large now. And so there's guess what? On the internet, you can get connected to
Mhm.
groups that like just about everything.
Yeah.
And so there's always like gatherings of
Mhm.
like dancing and going to the park and doing stuff. And you know, that was a big thing for me is like I'd been partying for decades. And so it was like, who the hell am I going to hang out with now?
Mhm.
But it, just like Amanda said, I had certain friends that we transitioned actually really great into this kind of sober friendship. And like she said, a few of them were actually interested in changing their relationship with alcohol. So that was beautiful to see that those connections stayed.
Yeah.
And then the reality is there are people that are just your party friends. And when you don't want to party anymore, they're not interested in being your friend. And if that's the case, they're actually not your friend.
Yep, so true. They're just a person who you used to get drunk with a lot.
Yeah. And they, you know, a lot of times getting sober makes people around you that drink a lot very uncomfortable, and it will bring up uncomfortable conversations in certain circles. And you just need to be prepared to have those conversations. But I also think that typically happens later when you're feeling way more secure
Right.
about these choices. I always say, like, going out there and announcing to the world that you're not drinking when you first
So
start
not
is
necessary.
like, you don't need to like get on a soapbox.
No, and everyone's worried about that. That's
Yeah.
probably one of the second fears is how do I talk about this?
Yeah.
And here's the trick. You probably don't even have to. I think you should always have a script prepared. But if you really listen to the questions people are asking, they're saying, can I get you something to drink? They're not saying, and yes, it's insinuated that it's an alcoholic beverage, but they're not saying, can I get you something to drink that has alcohol in it? And if not, please tell me why you're not drinking. That's not the question. The question is simple. And you just say, no thanks, or I'm good.
Topo Chico.
Or yes, or I'd like this alternative. You don't have to explain it. And so many people, myself included, I've done this many times, roll into, oh, well, I'm not drinking, or, you know,
Let's
verbal vomit.
Verbal vomit.
Yes.
Every reason of why, and no, I wasn't an alcoholic and I didn't go to recovery, and you shouldn't be
That
have to be
whole
worried about me.
thing.
And I'm not judging you, so don't worry. You can still drink. And
It's like you go into this like spiral of let me tell you my life story, and that's not even what they were asking. And so many times if you just say with confidence, this is what I want to drink, and they'll get it for you.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes they will ask, and then you just answer that exact question. Listen to the question. And if they say, oh, you're not drinking? No, I'm not. That's all.
Yeah.
They've asked for no solution, no anything. Just answer the question.
Completely. What are some other concerns that people have?
You know, there's just so many. It is, you know, well, I think there's two types of reasons that we drink typically, and usually they weave together and we all experience both of them. One of them is primarily social. So we're really worried about what's going to happen to our social life. We're a weekend warrior. We are someone who is, you know, happy hours, Sunday fun day type crew. And then we have the other group of drinkers who are emotional drinkers, right? So that's your come home every night, your head is spinning with thoughts and you want to unwind, or you had a lot of stress and you don't know how to cope with it. You're fighting with your partner. You don't know what to do. That is a different type of, you know, drinking scenario, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately under that, we're all drinking for emotional reasons, but and I don't know which one's harder or more difficult. They're both equally troublesome, right? And for that person, what I would say is that, you know, ultimately you are a powerful creature and you're a magnificent human being, and you were given the emotions of stress, anxiety, overwhelm. You were given a brain that thinks a lot of thoughts for a reason, and trying to cut that off instead of learning how to go with it is doing your body such a disservice. So a couple of tricks I would give if you are one of those people who is drinking because your mind doesn't stop. I hear that one a lot. Or because you just need to unwind and de-stress. One, if your mind doesn't stop, trying to like cut it off
doesn't work.
It's probably a disservice. Like if your mind still has thoughts in it, here's a thought, write them down, talk about them.
Journal, make a video.
Yeah, exactly. Get them out of your head, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're like spinning out because of all the things you didn't get done, a to-do list might be a good idea rather than trying to put them up here and then drinking them away. Like if you have more things to do, write them down, get everything out of your head. And then if you're someone who is overwhelmed, you're feeling, you know, anxious, or you have an emotion that you don't know how to handle, get with a practitioner who can teach you how to manage that emotion, right? I'm sure that a lot of the work you do here helps individuals feel through those things and that are
Yeah.
recurring emotions. But there's a lot of easy somatic experiencing or techniques that you can use. One of the easiest ones, I'm going to grab a prop here, is if you can get something like this is a beautiful crystal. So I'm sure it has some energetics as well. And you just take it and you pass it from left to right. What it's going to do is activate both sides of your brain, which is what is putting you anxiety because only one side is firing. And if you can activate both sides of your brain at one time, just do this for a minute and tell me if that doesn't help. That is a really quick fix out of anxiety. That's an actual quick fix that works versus trying to drink it out of your body.
And the other thing for those people, and it's interesting how many people that use alcohol to cope don't realize this, is alcohol is a depressant, but it actually creates very high levels of rebound anxiety. And so people, and if you've been a big drinker, you felt this.
Yeah.
When you wake up hungover, you have this crazy anxiety, tends to be mixed with shame. It completely jacks up your sleep cycle, which is the thing that's helping your brain to repair at night. And so all of those things that you think you're drinking for to help you, it actually makes them 5 to 10 to 50x worse. And so it's this idea that we've been taught of like, oh, this is going to help me relax. And it helps you relax in a very, very short term. But all of the things that it does to you psychologically and physiologically, it is like the polar opposite. And it's something I've really drawn a line in the sand with, is if you are struggling with any kind of mental health issues and you're still drinking, you're doing it wrong. Like it is, if you have anxiety, me, depression, me, if you have all of those things that are kind of innate stuff that you need to work with, doing those while drinking is actually almost impossible. And I actually think that's why I struggled with SI from my mid 20s to mid 30s, but I was really heavily drinking. And I actually think now I still have depression tendencies and anxiety tendencies. Now I have a much better toolbox. But I think what would happen is I would go blow it out 4 nights a week. And then, of course, by the time that ended, I was like, I felt like I was in some crazy, like, rat race, like, stuck in a wheel of, like, what am I doing? Like, I just felt like such a sham. And that why was nothing working? And of course, at that point, I get to the point of thinking like, maybe I just don't want to do this anymore because I can't see a way out.
Yeah, obviously I'm the problem. I'm doing something wrong. And that's not true. You're just not giving your body and your mind a chance to recover. And, I have to have a lot of heart for, I think that most of us drink because we don't have the tools or the resources or the wherewithal at some point to realize that there's something deeper, be that one or many big T or one or many little T traumas. And so sometimes when there's no tool available, I totally get that alcohol seems like the most common sense thing. And so I don't want to shame anyone for that, right? Like, because there are so many situations where that's the only thing we have access to. But I would almost assume that anyone who's watching this here is familiar with different options that are available and can actually help you versus pretend help you like alcohol does.
Yeah. I mean, because again, it all comes down to root cause trauma and exploring yourself and understanding why do you feel the need to cope with something that's actually detrimental to your health and whatever that is. And alcohol is just such a common tool for people to use. And it's just, I mean, in our society, just rampant everywhere. But interestingly, every study now shows it's like plummeting.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Like alcohol use is actually plummeting. Among teens, it's interesting. We have a 16-year-old, and by that time I was real boozy. And he doesn't
not
drink.
Even interested.
No. He has some friends and he's really open. And he's like, yeah, I have friends that drink because I just don't like it. It's just not my deal. And we're like,
okay.
That's good. That's good. Okay. Well, we'll talk about other substances, but that one at least I can relax on.
Totally. It's such a rite of passage, but it's really cool to see a new generation of kids coming up that don't bother with it, right? And I'm sure there's still a huge community of adolescents and young people who do, but it's really cool to see another side of the story.
Yeah, I completely agree. So what are some, how can somebody get in touch with you? What is kind of the outline of your like, how do you specifically work with people?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different opportunities to work with me. One is through private coaching, and I do one-on-one work with women for a period of months where we really get in. And for me, kind of like we've been talking about, this isn't about, oh, you need accountability to quit drinking, because almost everyone who I work with, they could quit drinking if they really wanted to, but what is really like ailing them is all of those doubts of how do I navigate the world without this thing that's been helping me. So half the time, the things that my clients and I talk about are not related to alcohol at all. It's okay. So you had a fight with your partner and you used to go drink when you had this happen. But what if we actually sat down and gave you some tools, some words, some scripts, some, embodiment practices to where you could be in your body? And what if we gave you the framework to go have a conversation with your husband in a way that felt good? And so a lot of it is just working through these life experiences that we used alcohol to hide from before, and showing you that you can show up for yourself and you can have that conversation with your partner, or ask a guy out or a girl out, or talk to one of your friends about something, or go to an experience without drinking, and having tools and practices and someone to hold your hand. So one is through one-on-one coaching, and the second is through, I have courses and programs that sometimes I run live and sometimes they're evergreen, but you can find me anywhere on the internet at Amanda Kuda, which is Kuda. And yeah, I just really, this is not the work I intended ever to be doing, but it's, probably kind of like you, it's just you.
Exactly.
Sometimes you get attracted to something and called to something, and then it is almost like your moral obligation to share it with people. And I never meant to quit drinking, and I definitely never meant to teach about it. But once I did, and I realized that, wow, my life, what I was actually doing was, for years, diluting my sparkle, keeping myself from shining at my brightest, keeping myself from being my biggest, boldest me. Because under those other excuses I had, which was, how am I going to have a social life? How am I going to calm down after 5 o'clock? Was, what would happen if I actually showed up as the boldest version of myself?
Completely.
I could fail. People could hate me. There could be all these other repercussions, but ultimately that's what I wanted inside, right? And so that's why I kept getting drawn to this lifestyle, and it's been better. It's the best decision I ever made. It's the catalyst for every amazing thing that's happened in my life since, which is a lot. And I kind of felt like, I just can't keep this to myself. There has to be other people thinking like this and understanding that this is not the path for them. And I have to, it is my obligation to this world right now to teach this. So if this resonates with you, hit me up. I'm here all the time.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you coming. This is such an important topic, and I feel like it was really timely that we finally met.
Yes. Oh my gosh, totally.
We've been playing internet tag for like a year.
Not that long, but a while. But it's another example of, guess what? Yeah. People come into your life when they're supposed to, and there's always another person out there who doesn't drink, and we got connected through friends. Completely. And that's how it works. You just kind of create this like downhill effect where you're like bringing people into your circle that are really cool and rad.
It's awesome. And having that deep, it's really amazing when you get sober how deep your relationships get quickly, because they go from surface to like really deep, because people are really tapped in.
Yeah, you're not asking those silly little small talk questions. You get to actually have the big talk all the time.
Exactly. All right, guys. Well, reach out if you have any questions. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Bye. Bye.